Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Dayal, and this is Spirit Matters with the Bhakti Center here with Kishore Chandra and Achyuta Gopi. We are your daily Bhakti Center podcast, bringing spiritual truths and wisdom into our everyday lives and where it intersects with our messy, personal, up and down, all over the place existences. Thank you guys for joining us. How you doing? And before you even answer how you're doing, I know what I want to talk about. Achyuta Gopi did a thing. You can't see. This is why you got to be in the live audience. You
Exactly.
got to be in
True.
the live audience. If you're
It's
not in
true.
our live audience, right? I don't know. I don't even know how you get into the live audience. On our Rise platform, bhakticenter.org, or send us an email. My email is dial at bhakticenter.org, DAYAL at bhakticenter.org. And we'll give you the info to get into our Rise platform where you can access live. We're doing this live to an audience on Zoom. There's people with us on Zoom. And you can see Achyuta. She did a thing. She shaved her head. And it looks
She
so
shaved her head.
beautiful, bright,
I
and
know.
vibrant. Every other feature of your face and being is just illuminated. Your nose ring, your earring, your smile, your shirt, your mala.
Thanks
I can see
before.
more of Radha Govinda behind you. It's just beautiful all around. I love it. Are you coming to
It'll
Kirtan
also
tonight? I
help
get to
you.
give you a hug?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
I'll be there.
So walk
Yeah,
us through.
can't
Tell
wait.
us what made you do it. You've been talking about this. Walk us through the significance, the meaning, the experience. Just we're talking about it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a really long time, and it was like more than just one thing. There were things about surrender. There were things about where's Krishna leading me? There are things about hmm, I've always been kind of like different in the Krishna consciousness movement. And I think a few years ago, I started like embracing that really like, okay, well, if we're going to be different, let's be different. And then I think it got to a point where it just felt like stagnant, not different. And I am a person that constantly asks why. So even to myself, and even during kirtan spiritual practices, I'm a person like, why am I doing this? And if I have no concrete answer, or a reason for it that's really spurring me on, then I try and change it. And so that's what it was kind of looking like. I was like, why am I holding on to all this stuff? And I had no answer, nor was it bringing me like great joy anymore. So it's like that it's time to change it. It's time to get in touch with Govinda and ask him and figure it out. And it happened. I haven't spoken to my mom yet, but other than that, it's great.
Is there anybody that doesn't know yet that shouldn't listen to this episode of the podcast?
Oh, now everybody knows. Let them know.
Let them know. Yeah, beautiful. How did it how did it feel looking at your hair on the floor or just seeing that kind of part of you go away?
I think big kind of self commitments like that should normally scare other people. I think that's the one adventurous side that I have where inside I'm like, no, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
Mm.
And it's like, yeah, and I'm like, yeah, because it's just me. It doesn't impact anybody else. Let's go for it.
Mm.
So that actually felt fun. And I couldn't see what was happening. So I just kind of had to close my eyes, have a great conversation, and really trust that it was going to work out. I mean, my brother did it, so I felt like I was in good hands.
Yeah, beautiful. And what do you feel does this symbolize something for you in the phase of your life or moving forward in a certain way or
Yeah. I kept trying to figure out what bhakti saints of the past, like especially, we have Mirabai and so many other beautiful saints and poets and seekers. And if you come to India, I'll probably tell stories about Mirabai. So
Ooh, if
just
you're
saying.
coming, we'd like to interrupt this podcast for a public service announcement brought to you by the Bhakti Center. We are going to India this fall, September 25th to October 8th, something like that. Come
Yeah.
along with us, Achyuta, Kishore, and I. Back to our regularly scheduled program.
So yeah, I wanted to kind of figure out like what would that look like today? What is that kind of spiritual rebellion almost look like?
Mm.
What does this feel like for us now? And usually I'm all for, yeah, let's try it. Let's figure out where this goes. Let's figure out a new model, but still make it fashion. But figure out a new model. So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that was
yeah.
it was really a big, this is actually a huge decision of surrender. One that kind of kept me up for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks before. Excuse my trucks. Uh,
People are
with the moment
waving.
that
You look great, Achuta.
right? But with that moment of surrender, like we even spoke about at the inception of this, when I kind of threw it out there, um, I really was like, but what are we actually afraid of? Are we
Hmm.
really afraid that God is not going to catch us and that all of our friends are going to talk to us? Not to talk to us because our head is like weirdly shaped and lumpy
You
or
got a great
strange.
head. You have a
Thank
great
God,
head.
right? Oh, I think that's the first thing I said. I looked at it in the mirror and I was like, thank God I have a great
You
head.
do. Not everyone pulls it off as well. You do. We have several shaved heads. You guys all have good heads too. Just letting you know, Sydney, Lee Laishworty, you guys all got good heads. But you have a
I got,
particularly good head.
and I always kind of wanted to donate. Like, it's a really big thing in Tirupati when you go to see Balaji, to
Mm.
like really give your hair as an offering, which, it's like very interesting. How do you get a god that needs hair? Longer story than we have time for on this podcast, but it,
Come to
it's
India.
a right? It's a really cool exploration in how God will take everything as an offering. And so
Mm.
really I made it an internal offering. I have a Balaji in my house. We had a
Mm.
conversation, that whole thing. Like, I tried to make it as intentional and as much of an offering as humanly possible. Um, and I think that that felt really amazing,
Mm.
especially on a full moon, especially on a time when I feel like there was like a series of days where you're calling out for like nectar and mercy and all the spiritual things that you're supposed to feel, and then getting that reciprocation where you actually do feel them. We had a festival on Sunday at the Bhakti Center, and I felt a downpour of grace like I have not felt in years,
Mm.
which was so needed. And I swear that day I just kept thinking, no, I got to do it. I got to do it. If this even brings on more feelings of that, no, I got to do it. So
Mm.
here we are.
Yeah. I have one more question, and this is for you and Kishore, because we left off yesterday in such a beautiful place, and there was a beautiful question about this swadharma and our nature in this life. And then Kishore was asking a really good question, like, so what is my swadharma? What is my nature in this life? And how does that guide the path that I lead? And you asked such a beautiful you made such a beautiful point and sort of evolved the question a little bit, Achyuta, where it was like there's an inner knowing, like we kind of know that. The question is actually, do I have permission to live my dharma in this life? And I think that I wanted to sort of leave off there and like this kind of open-ended question of like what you meant by that. And if you have something you want to share on that, Kishore, I also love to hear more for you, because I think that like it's almost like you made such a big change of like, you know, I can't, I just keep thinking of the India Ari song, I'm not my hair, I'm not my
Yeah.
skin, I'm the soul that lives within. It just keeps coming to my head. Um, but like this decision of like, this is who I want to be right now, and this is what I'm doing, and giving yourself that permission. And so I'm just kind of, can we launch into that discussion today about like what you meant by that, and what does it mean for us to what's keeping us back from that permission, and how do we give ourselves that permission, not just to cut our hair, but what I mean in the sense of living our truth or our dharma in this life.
Yeah, I think sometimes inner knowing gets a bad rap. It's like if you're outside of a spiritual circle, it's all about inner knowing. Then when you get inside a spiritual circle, they're like, first thing, you don't know anything. Trust me. and and while I do, I actually think that that's necessary. You need mentors and guides and spiritual companions and teachers, but those teachers actually should be the people who say, yeah, I've seen some things, but you also have an inner knowing. Like, they shouldn't strip you of that inner knowing. And I think Srila Prabhupada was a great example of saying, look, I'm going to guide you. I've seen some great things. You should learn the truth. find out the truth, but then don't abandon that inner knowing. And even, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he's like, look, Arjuna, I get it, but you know who you are on the inside. And I know you're asking me if really, and Arjuna really is asking, but do I have permission to do this? He's like, why would I kill all these people? And I feel like Arjuna's questions are like, but I can't kill my family members and my uncle and all these people and get away with it, right? Like, it's like, right? Like, I need I need somebody to validate this big, big, big thing. And Krishna is saying, he's like, yeah, it's true. It is a big dilemma. You do need a teacher, but then ask that teacher questions. And I like what Kishore said. He's like, I'm going to ask, there are these uncomfortable questions, and he's asking them, but it's because he wants to really, really know. It's not coming from a place of just challenging. But before I accept all this, let me ask the things that have made me uncomfortable my whole life. Let me ask the things that have really been weighing on me and find out what the answers are. And even if they're not satisfactory, keep searching, keep looking, because that's the hallmark of finding like-minded people. There will be like-minded people. And Rupa Goswami stresses that association needs to be with like-minded people. So I love this fact that we've been talking about it all week. You don't have to like everybody. You're not supposed to like everybody. That's fine. And everybody can be on a spiritual journey. But it's so important to find those like-minded people who, even if they don't see where you're going or may not agree at first, they're like, oh yeah, but I trust you. I see how you are. And I know that you're not just gonna abandon everything that you knew and were and all whatever. Like, that's more of the cult mentality. So I feel like getting away from that cult mentality is have a balance, strike a balance between, okay, I'm finding teachers, but I'm not going to abandon everything that I knew about myself. And I may evolve and that may change and morph, but let me first really get in touch with who I am and what I want. And that's what Krishna is telling Arjuna. Get in touch with who you are. Find the self. Look deep inside. Really see those natural proclivities. Really find those genuine inclinations, because what will repression accomplish? Right? It's not going to get you anywhere. But following this inner dharma is much more gratifying than even trying to follow somebody else's, because that thing is dangerous. Abandoning yourself is dangerous. And I like breaking down Krishna conscious concepts where he's like, following somebody else's path is dangerous. It's like, yeah, if you abandon everything you know about yourself, it's super dangerous. And so owning one's truth and expressing it is so much closer to super soul, Paramatma, divinity, than we could ever imagine. I know I rambled a lot.
No, abandoning yourself is dangerous. Put that down, Kimberly. That's our title today. What are you thinking, Kishore?
I'm just thinking of this thing that Achyuta said more towards the beginning about like how people will perceive and fear around that, right? Like, what if I did have a lumpy head, you know? Like, what then, you know?
The alternate
And
title to today's episode: What if I do have a lumpy head?
and but I think that that's there's such gold in that, because we have these identities that are manifested through the body, they're manifested through actions and culture, they're manifested through our belongings and what we accumulate through this life. And so much of, like this fear around loss or sacrifice or giving things up is coming from how people will perceive us without the thing. Like, how are people gonna view me or look at me? Are they gonna treat me differently if I cut off all my hair? Are they gonna treat me differently if I lose all my money and go bankrupt? Are they gonna treat me differently if I come out of the closet? Are they gonna treat me differently if I marry a person who society doesn't deem, like my family doesn't deem correct, you know? Like, all of these kinds of things are, I think, that are keeping us, that beautiful way that you put it, Achyuta, giving ourselves permission to actually live in our most authentic truth. And I think that what gets really heady and messed up in society is that this idea, what you're bringing up from Bhagavad Gita, Achyuta, this idea of following someone else's path, right? Krishna warns us, like, no, that's not the way. And so much of problems and issues are coming from that. You know, it's like this is what my parents told me to do. This is what society told me to do. This is what it looks like to be successful. This is what it looks like to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just feel like that's such a it's such a it's such a divergent way of thinking, actually, because it's kind of like incongruent to the nature of the soul. Like the soul is unlimited, it's unbounded. It's, you know, there's all these beautiful kind of characteristics that Krishna gives in the second chapter of the soul, right? It's unmanifest, it's eternal, it's all knowing, it's all these like beautiful things. And then we're trying to like put ourselves into boxes of just like, okay, we're gotta do this, gotta do that, gotta do, etc. And I think what's really interesting, or what came up for me, is that a lot of the times, especially with like the pandemic and like just like being at home a lot, inactivity or delving into tamas, or just kind of like giving up, like what's the point of anything, this kind of like cynicism or nihilism that we were talking about before, like Krishna's not going to catch me, or like whatever, you know, I'm just going through the motions, I'm just doing what my parents told me to do, I'm just doing what society told me to do. I feel like that can become very rife and very prevalent when we're not honoring the nature of the soul, and when we're not understanding kind of like the nature of the body and the nature of being in this material world. Because I love this verse from Bhagavad Gita about that. This is in the beginning of chapter 3, when Krishna is talking about karma, and Arjuna's, you know, kind of thinking like, oh, I can just, you know, I can just stop everything I'm doing. I could just be a renunciate. And Krishna is like, actually, I love this verse. He says, all people are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. And so this idea of just like actually like, and he goes on and on saying like, even to just maintain the physical body, there needs to be action. You're always doing something, you know, like when you're vegging out, not dealing with your problems and just like watching Netflix for 5 hours. And I'm not saying like that's like a terrible thing. I've done it before, you know, like it happens. It happens. But it's like, you know, that you've kind of like just fooled yourself, or allowed Maya to take over, in a sense, to fool yourself to think that this is doing nothing. Actually, it's doing something. You're doing something. You know, you're diving deeper into kind of the lie of like, okay, whatever, you know, it just doesn't mean anything. And that kind of, I guess I'll end because I feel like I'm ranting now too. That kind of action, because it's still an action, takes us farther and farther away from uncovering or discovering my truth. Who am I? What is my Swadharma? What was I put on this earth to do? You know, like the more I'm doing this stuff that's covering and just like quote unquote inaction, but it's actually action, the more that I'm moving far away from this stuff. So I'll wrap this up by saying, the more that I can, and I've found this very powerful too, the more that I can step, it takes a lot of courage, you know, to be like, I'm shaving my head, you know, I'm gonna make this decision, like whatever the shaving the head thing, you know, it can be XYZ decision. I'm gonna do that scary thing that I have been saying I'm gonna do for a while. I'm gonna let go of that thing that I've been saying I'm gonna let go for a while. I'm gonna have the courage to just like, I'm just gonna do it, and whatever's gonna come, like let it come. And I think like, what are the steps to get me to that place? You know, like Achyuta, it wasn't just like you woke up one day and I'm doing it. There was a couple of things that needed to happen, and then it's like Sunday, Bhakti Center, grace, Nityananda Trayodashi. Okay, I've gotten the message. It's clear, you know. So I'm wondering, like, how do we? Yeah, I guess the question that I'm having, or the question to both of you, is like, how do I create the perfect circumstances? Or perfect's not the right word. How do I like listen to my intuition and like really allow the messages to come clear through, so that I can actually hear them and do the thing, and have courage and have trust, and not fall into that like tamasic Maya or whatever kind of place.
Achyuta?
That is such a good question. Such a good question. Um, I think that we don't give our bodies enough credit. Right? Even though we our souls having this like bodily experience, our souls and our bodies right now are quite linked. And I feel like deep inside our souls can catch signals and messages much faster. So I think tapping into what's happening in your body. And I started doing this a while ago. I think I read something by Gabby Bernstein, and she was talking about how fear feels. And when you start catching yourself and being aware of when you're tense or afraid during the day, and then thinking about, okay, now what just happened there? What just made me afraid? Like, what's happening? So I think getting in touch with what's happening with our bodies will give us a clue into how we're actually feeling, what our souls are trying to communicate, what else we're getting from around us. So when somebody's talking to you and you start feeling this knot in your stomach and you start feeling all these things, instead of just saying, oh, I'm feeling triggered, it doesn't mean anything, it means I have to go talk to my therapist. No, really sit there, figure out. Like at the beginning of this week, even I had a moment. I was like, I'm feeling a lot of things, and I had to sit here and figure out, okay, what's going on here? And I think that's the first step in our intuition. And Bhagavad Gita is such a perfect model for these things, because it's the first thing Arjuna's like, whoa, I don't feel right. My bow is slipping from my hands. I'm tense. I'm shaking. I'm perspiring. My mouth is dry. Knees weak. I can't function like I normally do. This is a problem. My body is sending me a signal that something is wrong, and I want to listen to it. And so now he's thinking, is like, my intuition is telling me, fight or flight, run away as fast as possible. And Krishna's like, no, your intuition is telling you this is hard. It's difficult, but not impossible. You're made for this. It's difficult, but I'm here with you. We're okay. And those moments, those areas of confusion, they say come right before a breakthrough. So it's like, how do we create the perfect situations? Yeah, we're in them. They're the most uncomfortable ones, but they're the ones that really, it's like, this has been chafing upon the skin of my soul. It's like those things that are nagging at you from the back of your head. We know the things, like, it's been nagging at me. It's like, okay, now how do I get myself to a place where it moves from something that's just nagging at me to something that, all right, we can do something with this. So yeah, like you said, we're never not acting. Just like Srila Prabhupada is like, you can never just not think of nothing. You can never just, it doesn't become a thing. Even when you think of nothing, then you're still thinking of something. And so one point that really, really, really struck me when you were talking about it was, you know, looking at our souls, looking at the Swadharma, our nature of our souls. But what if our souls, we have this issue because technically, along with being eternal and blissful and truthful, what if our souls are also naturally subservient to someone? So we're used to looking at someone going, how's this looking? How are these decisions going? We okay? And the supreme person who always has our best interests at heart usually says, yeah, I'm right with you. We're going. But now we disengage from that supreme soul, right? We disengage from listening to Paramatma and ourselves. And now we're kind of looking for that interaction with other fallible souls who are also used to being subservient to someone way more supreme. So I feel like honoring our truth helps us get back in touch with our supreme self and the supreme personality of Godhead. But it really gets us back in alignment with what we were made for, which is not always looking so externally for, how's this going to work? How's this going to go? But really going back to Paramatma and saying, okay, I know we have an eternal relationship. How's this looking for us as a whole, as a soul? Like, how's this going?
Beautiful. Pasha loves what you just said. She put love that heart emoji. And I was thinking of something. I looked up a verse from the Gita. I love Gabby Bernstein, by the way. I want to have her as a guest on Spirit Matters. I'm putting it out there into the universe, and I will manifest it. Anyways, she used to, by the way, I don't know if you ever know that, she used to rent space at the Bhakti Center and host events there before she was as big as she is now. This
So
was
this is not just a pipe dream. Like, this is not like a
10 years
random.
ago. She used to use the temple of the Bhakti Center and have weekly gatherings, and like 100 women would show up and she would speak there before she was known as like as big as she is now. So she used to come to us, and we were all brahmacharis, and there's like 100 women in the temple, and we were just like, stay away.
Not for nothing. I have to say one thing, like, to the credit of the Bhakti Center, I think the Bhakti Center monk brahmacharis were always the most down to earth that I'd ever met. I really felt like they had kind of grasped the concept of having to like live in New York, be in New York, and associate with people in New York, and not make it too weird.
Mm,
So I'd say
thank you.
good on you.
Thank you. Maybe that's why we didn't stay brahmacharis, but I
But,
appreciate that
also, I feel like we have to talk about that at some point on an episode. Like in Varnashram Dharma, brahmacharya was something you did from 5 to
period of
25.
time.
It was a
Yeah.
phase. Like it
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't,
yeah.
you weren't actually supposed to stay in this place of no
Mm.
connection for forever.
Yeah, and I'm gonna wrap that all up into what we've been discussing because I was just writing about that this morning because I was reading through the Gita and reflection and putting together some thoughts, and I was thinking of my own story of when I shifted from ashrams, from a brahmachari monk life to when I got married, and that transition. I had lived as a monk for 10 years of my life, and it was my entire adult life. I became a monk when I was 18. So what I was like, I moved out of the house into the ashram. I never lived on my own. I've never lived alone in my entire life. Even when I got married, my wife and I moved in with another couple. There was four of us in a two-bedroom apartment or three-bedroom apartment, and so I've always had that communal living, um, and it was during that time was almost kind of like that as we've been discussing, like my question was what's the right thing to do, and what I was realizing is that there's not a right thing to do. It's like what's right for me in this moment. And it's not that one or the other is right or wrong, but it's like, how am I going to not, how do I not make the right choice, but how do I make the choice right? And it really required a lot of sincere introspection and reflection. Um, the verse that's been coming to my mind now as we're speaking is from the 14th chapter of the Gita, where Krishna is talking about the modes of nature, as Kishore was mentioning, the modes of nature. And Krishna mentions the manifestation of the mode of sattva, or goodness, or illumination, can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. And so this feeling that this sense of, you're talking about this inner knowing or this sense of being aligned, it's felt viscerally in the body. Like there's a congruency with this inner alignment of the soul and the heart, and the way our body feels. And so the body, it's never going to lie to us, um, and so being in tune in that way, it lets us know when something is safe or not, when something feels wholesome. And Prabhupada says in the purport, um, very briefly, it's a small purport. He says the nine gates in the body refer to the nine, literally the gates, the orifices, the places where there's interaction between the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, etc. Um, and he says, when every gate is illuminated by the symptom of goodness, it should be understood that one has developed the mode of goodness, sattva. He said, in the mode of sattva, one can see things in the right position, one can hear things in the right position, and one can taste things in the right position. One becomes cleansed inside and outside. In every gate, there is development of the symptom of happiness, and that is the position of goodness. And so this ability to actually you're talking about asking ourselves these questions, it depends on the mode of nature in which we're living, and that is developed over time. It's not a one-time decision. It's an investment in our lifestyle and in the choices that we make and the relationships that we keep. That the relations, I need to work right now on developing the relationships that I'm going to need later. I need to work on the mindset now that I'm going to want to have when this decision comes up. And so it's this whole process of spiritual life. It's not just these do's and don'ts, but it's a process of illuminating myself so that my inner knowing can really shine forward, and I could create the space in my life. Where do I create the space in my life to feel that, to pay attention to what's going on in my body, to how to is this decision being made in a rushed, um, like fast-paced chatter of the mind, or is it like a slow, soft, but quiet and firm and steady um, whisper of the heart that is like steady? And so I think that self-awareness is a practice. It's a muscle that we exercise and grow, and it's such an important part of our spiritual life. And Arjuna exercises that to a very, very strong degree in the first chapter of the Gita, where it's like he doesn't know what to do, but he takes a step out of his context, and he reflects not just what am I doing, but why am I doing this? Like why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? What's going to come out of this? I see no good that can come of this. And so he's kind of like giving into that space. And so I was just reflecting on that in terms of the Gita, and I was really appreciating the point you made, Chuta, about being able to slow down and feel things in our body and ask ourselves what's going on in any given moment. And that's all the time we have today. We're at 9:30. I'd love to get some closing thoughts and words from you guys, but first we're going to Kimberly. Kimberly, what are we taking away from this episode today?
Give yourself permission to live your most authentic truth. Our soul is boundless. It's incongruent to the nature of our soul to follow someone else's path and ignore our unique nature. And then it's important to get in touch with our body signals to understand ourselves and our intuition so we can illuminate ourselves so our inner knowing can shine through.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kimberly. Kishore, Chuta, any closing word?
I will just say that I would like to unpack maybe tomorrow or next week this idea of the body and listening to its signals, because I feel like it's a very nuanced thing actually, because something very real is that people who have gone through any sort of trauma, which is basically everyone, like birth is a trauma, anyone who's gone through any sort of trauma, a situation that is happening now after the trauma, years ahead, that is completely safe from an objective point of view, but something in them will read it as unsafe, and their body then goes into like the trauma response. And so it's like our body doesn't lie, yes. However, it's like yes, the body keeps the score. Such an amazing book, the Trauma Bible. It's so good. Our body doesn't lie, yes, but it's like, how do I guess what I'm trying to say is, the more that we don't listen to those signals of like, hey, something's going on here and I need to unpack it, which as a society, we're not really told to listen to those signals. Like maybe now in the past, like 4 or 5 years, like that kind of stuff is coming out more. But as a society, it's just like, hey, how are you? I'm great. Okay, cool. Oh, like that's the society that we live in. And so as a society, we're not told to really like sit and listen to your traumas and like figure out what's going on with yourself and da-da-da. So I just would like to unpack that a little bit more. Like what's the practical way of doing that? Because we can say, sit and listen to your, body, but like, what does that actually look like? What does it actually mean on a day-to-day basis or on a long-term basis?
I think that's a beautiful thing to be able to talk about tomorrow. And, there's so many thoughts on it, and I'm probably going to have to go and write a note to myself. But what I really love is something that I'm going to like yoink from you, Doyle, is this: am I in a situation that is going to have me make decisions in a rush and hasty chatter of the mind, or a slow and steady whisper of the heart? That one, I was like, no, I'm taking that line.
All right, I want to see your Instagram post about that.
It's happening. It's going for it.
Beautiful. Was that your point, or did I cut you off?
No, that was my point. That was it. It was great.
Beautiful. I love the question, Kishore. Interestingly enough, Arjuna asked that question in the second chapter of the Gita. It says, how does a self-realized person sit? How do they walk? And so we see these things, and so I think it's very powerful. There's more that coming to my mind, but I'm going to cut us off now because we're at time. We love you guys so much. Thank you for listening. Please continue to listen with us. Again, if you want to tune in live sometime, reach out, connect to our Rise platform on our website. We would love to have you in our live audience. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you can rate and review our podcast. Rate it and review it. Leave a note. Tell us how much you love us. We want to hear it. And we just love knowing that you're out there. Thank you guys so much. We'll be with you next time. Bye-bye.